Welcome to the Outdoors and Holistic Project, the podcast edition with City Girl and Nature. My name is Chrisia, and I'm joined by a lovely young lady called Hafsah. Hi.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
No problem. Would you be able to tell me a bit about you and what is the work that you do, I guess?
Yeah, sure. I am a school and community gardener. I'm a food grower. I like doing crafts. And I'm also a outdoor education advocate in a way. I've been working in London for the past year and a half in the community and school gardening scene. Before that, I grew up in Leicester and did some bits there, but that shifted to London a little while ago. My main focus of my work is going into schools and community groups, teaching them how to grow food, sharing different things that you can do with plants, different crafts, and just really engaging them with the natural world. I've been doing this for about 5 years now. I studied horticulture with a specialism in garden design, and then that shifted to more community gardening and school gardening, and that's what I've been doing since.
Wow, that's a journey within itself.
Yeah, it is.
It must have been big as well, moving from Leicester to London. That transition,
Yeah, it was very different cities, and it's quite an adjustment. London, I feel like I'm not a city person when it comes down to it, and but I moved because it was for work, to be honest. I tried making community gardening and school gardening work in Leicester, and I did do a lot of stuff there, but it wasn't. There still was. I wanted to learn more and work with organizations that were like really doing really important work and were fully immersed and integrated into communities. So I moved out over here. Well, I got married, then my husband we moved over here. And yeah, it's been great. It's been nice. It's a nice city, lots happening. So there's always something interesting. Like being here today, I've not been to this garden before. So yeah, it's just you're always learning new things here, and I think that's really nice.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And you said horticulture, right? What is that?
Well, it's basically the study of plants, horticulture. It's kind of, it's about how plants grow. Yeah, literally everything about plants. My degree was extremely varied. Like we did from plant identifications to things like driving tractors, so we'd be able to work on farms and grow plants, to also like the science bit of like genome editing and looking into all of that stuff. So it's a very varied title too, and it was a very varied degree, like the stuff I learned, and it was amazing. But I did specialize in garden design when I was doing it. I had this great lecturer, Dave, and he introduced me to the world of therapeutic horticulture, about how plants are not just, in my mind, they're always just like more ornamental and for people to see, but also he explained to me and gave me some great books as to how plants were actually healing, and they healed people. There's this book called Healing Fields, and it's about people who've come back from war and have the opportunity to garden and how that changes them as people. So anyway, once I was introduced to this, I was like, okay, I've got to do some work around this. Like, this is what I want to do. And then I was like, I want to help create these spaces that people can heal in. So then I went into garden design as part of my degree. So I was designing private gardens, but also public gardens. I worked as a garden designer for a bit as well. Worked for landscape architect for a bit. And towards the end of it, I was kind of realizing I wasn't serving the community as much as I wanted to. So then it shifted to community gardening and community food growing, because I felt like that was the most direct way to achieve that element of helping people heal through gardening, or just, giving people the opportunity to take whatever they take from gardening. So yeah. that
So
was the
what was
trajectory.
the degree specifically? I know you're speaking about a
Oh,
degree.
right.
Yeah, so what was the degree that you kind of took?
It was literally horticulture.
Just
Yeah, it was
horticulture?
just straight up horticulture.
Oh.
Yeah,
So
it was called horticulture.
because I've heard that people do horticulture courses.
Mm.
So that's why I was like,
Yeah.
what? When you was like saying the degree, I'm thinking, did I miss the degree? So
No, it was
I
straight
didn't.
up
So this is new
horticulture.
information to me as well.
Yeah.
I didn't know that people actually can study horticulture in
Yeah.
university and stuff.
You can. It's very rare. I think there was only 2 places doing it when I was taking the degree. So I studied in Nottingham Trent, and I have been hearing that even that might be coming to a close, because there just isn't enough funding and there isn't enough interest, because people are nowadays doing the courses. Like for me, the degree was the best thing I could have done. Like I didn't know what I wanted to do in the field, so learning all of these different things was great because I was able to choose. Whereas I feel like the courses do kind of channel you in one direction, and you kind of need to know in advance what you want to do. But so yeah, you do get degrees. I think Capel Manor College might do one, and then Nottingham Trent did one, and they still do. I think I was just hearing some rumours. But yeah, you get the RHS courses in horticulture, and they're great. A lot of people I know have trained through them, and they're brilliant as well. So there's lots of different ways. But it was literally BSc in horticulture.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what kind of drove you in that direction? Was it something that you always had a passion for?
Well, I think it was underlying. I grew up with 5 siblings and parents who were like, oh my gosh, there's so many kids. What can we do with them? So we'd always be out in nature. Every weekend, my dad would take us somewhere to a park. He'd take us out of the house and just run around to get rid of all of our energy. So I was always around green spaces and plants and trees. And then when I finished college, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I literally had no idea. And all of my friends were going into nursing, law, that kind of stuff. And I was very close to I'd sent an application through for nursing. I was about to do it, and my older sister's like, Hafsah, why are you doing something which you're not even 100% sure about? It was when the fees came in too, had just come in a few years before that, and I was like, yeah, that's true. So I took a gap year, and then in that gap year, I got an email saying I had got an allotment, and I'd forgotten that I'd even applied for this allotment. But like 4 years prior, when I was 16, or maybe a bit younger than that, I was growing tomatoes with my dad in our back garden. And he was like, oh yeah, you get these places where you can just grow whatever food you want. And I was like, what? That's wicked. So I don't even remember doing this, but I must have gone to the computer and applied for a local allotment. And of course, the waiting lists are so long, they contacted me like years later. And then, yeah, they was like, you have an allotment. And I was like, okay, this is what I'm doing on my gap year then. So I started working on the allotment, and then it just went from there. Realized there was a degree in it. Couldn't convince my parents that horticulture was a thing and I would get a job in it. And so I actually did an apprenticeship at a law firm for a bit to be like, I don't like law. And then, yeah, after they were like, okay, fine. Yeah, okay. I'm sure there's something in horticulture. Sure, go for it. Because they're farmers back home. They were farmers in India. And for them, they've come to England to get away from that. And then I'm just like, I want to carry on farming. So, yeah, it was quite interesting. And then, yeah, that's how I ended up doing the degree. It was quite scary, but I'm really glad I did it. Yeah.
It sounds like an interesting journey, and
Yeah.
I guess how you described even doing the degree in itself and being able to then kind of pick what are some of the, I guess, job roles you can kind of have doing a degree in horticulture, for instance.
Yeah, it's a good question. You can do things like you could be a head gardener at a site. So this is jobs that some of my friends from uni are doing now. One's a head gardener. One works for a lab as a she's doing a PhD in wheat. So she's just inspecting and looking at wheat and looking at heritage grains of wheat and their genes and how they can become more mass produced because we are losing the diversity of our food. So she's looking into things like that. Another friend of mine works for a vertical farm as one of their managers. So she manages a vertical hydroponics farm, which is a very cool new world. So she manages that. Another friend works for the council on their like landscaping team. So there's a lot. There is a
Wow,
lot
that
you
sounds
can
like
do.
a variety of so
Yeah.
much stuff.
Yeah.
Even the council, I wouldn't have guessed that.
Yeah, no, and just having that specialism and that experience and that knowledge, I think that gives you like quite a good just knowing a little bit about plants helps a lot in this kind of work. So yeah, there's so many options. It's a whole world.
So being a gardener as well, is there any, I guess, best tips on growing crop? Whether that's the soil or, and like, what's your thoughts around this as well?
Best tips.
So like best ways, I guess, best ways that to
Yeah.
grow a crop. Like, is there a specific soil or like a
Right.
specific method?
Yeah.
And do you have like any knowledge around that? I'd like to explore that.
Yeah, well, I've got a lot of experience with urban food growing, and my best tips is container growing for people who have very limited space. Container food growing is a really, really great thing to do. I'm saying this with the assumption that people have any space, and I know some people don't, and it's very hard. But container growing is a really good and easy way to grow food. Things like, if you're thinking of food, things like potatoes and garlic, which you just put in and you forget about for months, and you only need to water them. Like, you don't need a greenhouse for them, or you don't need to propagate them. You chuck them into a pot and they're fine. Like, people can plant potatoes now. It's getting a little late for garlic, but you could try, it's all about experimenting. Techniques, I would say, things which it's really important that when you garden, you're contributing to your local wildlife, you're contributing to the biodiversity around you, and I feel like it's really important that you consider that when you garden. So gardening organically, not using any pesticides or any chemicals. Thinking of the best natural ways to fertilize your food, so you can make your own fertilizers with things like borage leaves, and
What's that?
so it's a plant which the leaves, when you soak them and steep them in water, and you've got to weigh them down in a bit of water, and just leave them for a bit in a dark. You put them in a dark container, soak them in water, and let them stew away. And they smell very, very bad. Sorry, not borage, comfrey. That's what I meant to say. They smell very, very bad. But after like a couple of weeks, you're left with this liquid. So all the nutrients from the comfrey goes into the water, and you're left with this nutrient-rich liquid. And you can dilute that with a bit more water, and you can water all of your plants. And it's full of all the best things for your plants that it needs, and it grows prolifically. Like, if you have one comfrey plant, it just gets massive. I do that of quite a few of my sites. Have a very stinky bin on the side of comfrey leaves. But yeah, I think it's just really important that you consider you're contributing to the local wildlife. So like, not using like plastic that will break down and then just add to the huge heaps of plastic that already exist. Get things which are hard wearing, long lasting. Use peat-free soil. That's really important. Peat is something that a lot of now there's a bit of a shift, but peat is basically, it's an organic matter that is used in a lot of compost and has been used in a lot of compost for many years, but it's basically dug out of bogs. There's some in Scotland and somewhere in various parts of England, but these bogs take years, like decades, to form this peat, and we're like harvesting them at a crazy rate that doesn't allow them to renew. These bogs also hold carbon, so when they're being dug, they're releasing all of that carbon back into the atmosphere. So a lot of most compost has peat in it. But in the recent years, there's been a shift, and even the government is trying to reduce/stop the use of peat. I'm not exactly sure where they are with that thing. I think it was by 2030 that they want to completely stop the use of peat in agriculture and growing. But you have lots of peat-free alternatives now. And I think that's really important, just as consumers, to be like, yeah, we don't want to use peat, and buy the things which are peat-free. So I'd say definitely, if you're food growing, use peat-free compost. Yeah, those are the few things I can definitely
Yeah, really
say.
good because I didn't even know none of them. So even for someone that's like, I don't actively grow stuff in my own house, but I am part of like community gardens and spaces. So I do get to be a part of some sort of harvesting and stuff. But to know
Yeah.
like when I do get the opportunity to
Yeah.
do my own kind of personal garden, and I have done some actually in my mom's garden, but in my own place, you know, because I live in a flat as well. You know, just
Yeah.
managing the space as you put it as well, and also I've got my little son as for instance. So yeah, just trying to navigate all of those factors
Yeah,
and stuff. But I'm
yeah.
happy that I have like spaces that I can go to, and hearing this information, at least I have it in my memory, you know, like to know that these
Yeah.
things are important when
Exactly.
exploring and getting into gardening. Because I guess a lot of people do, when they first want to start gardening and stuff, they want to start, and then sometimes they get discouraged because, you know, like plants don't grow, or they feel like they're not nurturing it properly and stuff like that. But having the correct knowledge to start off with will definitely help on that journey.
Yeah, yeah. No, I get that. It's hard when, yeah, plants are living things. They surprise us. They still surprise me. I still lose plants every year for some reason or other, though. Like slugs. I don't know. It could be anything. Foxes, you know, digging up the plants that I've planted. It teaches you a lot of lessons, gardening. And I think one of the big ones is patience, and just being very patient with things. And like you said, it's important to know some of this stuff before you go into gardening, so you're aware. Because I know so many like people I've worked with who are like, I started to garden, but this died, this happened, it went yellow, and then I stopped, and now I'm here to learn, and it's great. Like they've come to a community space to learn how to grow, but it didn't discourage them, which was good. It just made them reach out for the resources they needed. Yeah.
It's really good, yeah. So you did mention also that you do like community and schools kind of
Yeah.
gardening and stuff too. I guess nowadays, just like even here at the paper garden, there's chickens, for instance, and activities and stuff like that. What's some of like the responses you get from the young people and children, you know, especially being in the city?
Well, the main response I get is positive. Like any opportunity they get to be out with the plants, they love it. So many of them, a lot of the students and children I work with don't have gardens. They live in flats, like a lot of us do in London. And so they really, really enjoy the time they get to spend in the garden, particularly with the animals. I think having animals changes a lot of things. It kind of, when they have something to care for, and something that's living that interacts with them. Like plants don't interact with you in an immediate sense. And I think for children, they sometimes need something to interact with them immediately, even though, yeah, plants are long term, but it's good to have a bit of both. So I love to see it here that there's a bit of both. The school garden I look after has both chickens, guinea pigs, and of course the garden itself. So like the after school club I give them half an hour with the animals. I'm like, guys, hang out with the animals, cuddle the guinea pigs, get everything you need. And they've had such long days at school, and they immediately run to the animals, and they love it. They absolutely love it. Like they're like fighting to be the ones who collect the eggs that day, you know. And then they also get an element of the food growing, and it's all connected because a lot of the food we grow at the school is for the chickens and the guinea pigs. And although like everything, all the bedding that I take out is put in the compost, and that comes into the food growing, you know. And yeah, overall it's always really positive, and it's a bit harder when you get to older children. Like we live in a kind of world where there is a lot of distractions and a lot of things that children are being entertained with. So plants are a very slow form of entertainment, if you want to call it entertainment. They're a very slow thing. And I feel like as children get older and they use these other entertainments more, it's harder for them to engage with plants because they don't see the immediate effects and the immediate reward from them. So I do find it's very different with older children. I tend to do activities which are more like making things, where they immediately see a result of what they're making, but they still are benefiting. Like I'll make bird feeders with them, or I might get them to sow seeds, and then even though they don't get to see it grow, they might not see it grow immediately. They kind of know that they're contributing to a part of the chain. So yeah, it's very interesting the different responses you get at the different ages. But overall, they always enjoy being outside.
I think it's important that you did mention, in fact, around the fact that, you don't, for young people and children, you don't instantly get to see like the plant sprout. Even looking back on my memory of biology in primary school, I think that's what the main thing we was taught.
Yeah.
It was to plant something, and I remember like every day coming to look at the plant. Oh, nothing's there, like. And I know for children and young people, that's a big thing, cause exactly for what the reasons you said. And I guess also they can be like, when the plant dies also, and all these elements. So what would you say is like the best age, I guess, or when's best to introduce, the outdoors and nature and gardening to like children, babies, toddlers? I don't know, like when do you think is like probably the best time? Yeah.
Honestly, I'd say immediately at any age. Like there is no... Yeah, they take away things at different ages. I think the earlier they're introduced to it is the better, of course. And that comes with a lot of privileges of access and space. But the earlier they're introduced to it, the more they learn as they grow up. They won't be like... I've seen children who are scared of worms or like a little ant and things like that. And that's just their upbringing. They maybe haven't been exposed to these things, and then I'm exposing them to it, and they're having these reactions for the first time, but by the end of the year they don't have those reactions anymore. So it's kind of just, they take a while to catch up if they start doing it when they're older. But honestly, from toddler age, from whatever age, it's just getting them outside and giving them an opportunity to be outside, just wander around. Doesn't even need to be anything that's activity led. They find ways to entertain themselves, and so the charity I work for, Hammersmith Community Gardens, we do a lot of things like play schemes. And so over the holidays we get children of various different ages who come, right from toddlers to like 12-year-olds, and they come to the farm, and the toddlers will literally be crawling around and jumping in puddles and trying to drink the very dirty water. But parents are chill with it. It's like, well, they stop them from drinking the water sometimes. But, it's... it's just them interacting and it being normal, like it's not a novel thing. I think as they get older, it becomes a very novel thing. And that's when that relationship with plants is like, it doesn't feel as natural. So the earlier you do it, the more natural that relationship becomes with plants. And the later it is, the more novel it is, and it's more like, it's a special experience. And it shouldn't be like that. It should just be a very normal thing. And again, I have to put this disclaimer all the time. It comes with access to spaces and access to green spaces, and not everybody has that. But which is when community gardens come in, and it's so great to see so many community gardens in London. I'm sure there's areas where perhaps they don't have any, but yeah, it's great that you have community gardens. You're serving the community and providing them with that access. And giving opportunities for students to come in. I know here at the Paper Garden, I was hearing that the schools come in and they learn things, and then you guys go over there and they do things over there, and I think that's such a great system to have.
Would you say there's like a difference with the younger people you work with to the older people in the community?
That's an interesting one. I'm thinking the older people tend to be there because they want to be there. The younger ones are there, well, the ones I work with in schools are there because they're told to be there. That's the difference. It's interesting. I think with young people, you get a variety. You get some who are very, very keen and very interested and want to learn. And then you get some which aren't interested, but are just present, and they still take away a lot from it, and they still benefit from that experience. With the community members and older groups, they're there because they want to be there, and they have varying reasons for wanting to be there. And it's different. When you interact with adults, you hear about how they are benefiting from the gardening and how they're benefiting from this space, and you hear about the challenges they're facing in growing and what they want to learn. I run a community garden, again, part of Hammersmith Community Gardens. We are subcontracted to run a community garden in Earl's Court. And I look after the garden there, as well as run community gardening session. And I get a bunch of very varied individuals, and it's one of my favorite days of the week on a Thursday when I go. And they're all very, very different, but they all their love of plants brings them together. We went to Kew Gardens recently for the Orchid Festival, and it was chucking it down like torrential rain the whole day, and Kew doesn't have many sheltered spots, so it was a bit tricky. And I was the one who was more miserable than them, but they were loving it. They loved the fact that they were in Kew Gardens and were seeing these amazing plants. I was like, oh guys, I'm so sorry. It's so cold and it's so wet. It's not the best day. And they're like, what are you talking about? This is amazing. This is great. We went to the Marianne North Gallery, and they were just, adults interact with it in different ways. It's really great working with community members like that. Just providing them with that space. One of my ladies, she was like, this gardening group has changed my life. She was very seriously ill 2 years ago, and I think it took a knock to her physical health, but also her mental health and her self-esteem. And the other day, she was walking her dogs, and she was going past the garden, and she was like, you know what, coming here has literally changed my life. She feels like she's got something she's contributing to. This community garden's down the road from her. When she, in the summer, I'm only there a day a week, so she would come, she'll water it, she will sow seeds. She's learned so much from that. She's become, she feels empowered to grow food and has that knowledge and experience now. And I think she's also working for another organization now where she's going to give them tours of the garden. She's going to give public tours of the garden. So she's been able to use the knowledge she's got of plants now in other places too. So it was really nice to hear that.
It's really nice to hear that, honestly, because those skills then become transferable as you're explaining, and it can really take people different places and spaces, and it's really nice to hear that also. I guess so. You work with Hammersmith community gardens. So within that as well, what are some of the activities you actually do? I know you mentioned Kew Gardens just then, and so what's some of the other activities and stuff that you guys do within that community?
It's a good thing to mention. We do lots of different things. So we have one main site called Phoenix Farm in White City. And from this site, there's I think there's 20 of us staff, and we all offshoot onto different sites. So Phoenix Farm is where we have some animals, we grow food, and school groups come there. And then we all are working at different sites. So we have, so it's very site-based. We are a community garden, so we have all these different sites which then engage other community groups. Some of the activities that we might do are things we have various things we do for children. like scavenger hunts. We have a pond, so we might do pond dipping. So like I was saying, we do the play schemes over the holidays, and I think we'll probably be making like you get little punnets and you fill them with soil and they can make their own little garden. So that's something we do a lot with children, and that works with various age ranges. We maybe do like a little forage for food for the chickens. And yeah, so we do lots of different things. We also have a lot of all the school gardens. We have like 12 different school gardens that we look after. I think that might have increased. And in each of those schools, they're then all running activities. So, for example, yesterday, one of the activities I did was a scavenger hunt for my after-school club. So I put lots of eggs around the garden, and I gave them all riddles, and they had to go on a little... Yeah, I can't remember the riddles, but like, it was like, if you give me what you don't need from the garden, I will give you something really special in return. And that was the compost bins. So like, just give them everything you don't need from the garden and give you some lovely soil. So yeah, I do things like scavenger hunts. Other things we do are we have corporate organizations that come to us, and then we facilitate them. So like, for example, if we have a site that we look after that needs a lot of TLC, we'll get corporate organizations that come as part of their is it like social responsibility or community responsibility day, and they help us like just make places look amazing and perfect. Over winter, when things are a bit quiet, we do things like winter walks. So a lot of our volunteer sites close for the winter, just so there isn't much happening and it's raining. So we do winter walks where we'll go around. So one of the winter walks, one of them was to Kew Gardens. I took them to the Orchid Festival. One maybe to Hampton Court, another one just along the Thames to like some of the museums. So yeah, we do lots of different things. It's all about just engaging as much as possible the community with green spaces, teaching children, teaching community members. Yeah, we've got like a introduction to food growing course coming up. So yeah, it's very all about food.
So within loads of communities as well, I know we've spoken a lot about community gardens that are already established, I guess. But there is a lot of spaces nowadays that are kind of unkept or abandoned. If someone is like really passionate, I guess, and they feel that they would like to start their own community garden, I guess, what were some of the kind of tips and how would they go about, you know, getting started with that, especially with like growing maybe edible plants as well as just plants
in general. So, well, one thing would be to identify a site. So like you said, there is a lot of spaces nowadays which are like you walk down the street and you're like, oh, well, I do anyway. I'm like, oh, that could be a nice community garden. And so the first thing would be to identify a site and then get permission to create a community garden there. So you'd want to contact the local council and ask them whether you could use that site to create a community garden on. And hopefully they say yes. Especially if it's like a disused site and it has been for a very long time, you're more likely to be able to, them saying yes. I do know some people who do guerrilla gardening, which I find is kind of cool. I've done a bit of it myself. It's just growing things in places where maybe you don't have permission to grow, but it's not in the way of anyone and it's a bit of soil. Put a plant in. You're helping insects. Maybe you're growing food. Great. But going back to community gardening.
Wait. Before you go back to community gardening, so a bit of soil, a bit of like seeds and stuff. And so how does it work, guerrilla gardening? What is that?
It's literally like a form of activism in a way, because we have such little access to green spaces and to actual land to grow things on. Guerrilla gardening kind of takes that power back. And so what I used to do is I'd go around to a lot of tree pits around where I lived, and I would plant things like spring bulbs because I'm just like, this is soil. It needs to have plants in them, plant spring bulbs. Or if I walked past like a place which was derelict and there was nothing happening, it was just a bit of earth, but maybe it was boarded up so I couldn't access it, I would chuck like some wildflower seed bombs over so that at least there's plants growing and things growing for wildlife. But yeah, guerrilla gardening can come in lots of different forms. People literally create whole gardens and then fully expecting that they potentially could be destroyed by the council, because it's not always that easy to get permission. I'm saying it like it's easy, but it can sometimes be lots of red tape and just, yeah, that's the thing. I think one of the things that would be really good to see is like a shift from the top of councils, of government even, just being like, yeah, we need community gardens, and using some of this derelict space and encouraging the use of it as community gardens. But I do know many people have struggled to get that land, but it's possible. And I think doing it in that way just makes it more sustainable, especially if you are engaging a community with it. You kind of want it to be sustainable and you want it to be there because then people get attached to these spaces, you know. So yeah, approaching the council, seeing if you could use that land or if they've got alternative land that you could use, and then you'd want to get some money to start building things, and there is a lot of funding out there available to kind of start a community garden, things that come in through the stream. I know that the department for the DEFRA basically released a bit of funding last year, which I know some community groups used. The RHS has a very good page on community gardening, and it has links to the funding there's this website that basically has all of the information on funding and all the available funding. So if people are interested, they can visit the RHS website, and it gives a lot of details on funding streams that you can apply for as a community garden. And then it's a case of, well, I guess the first thing would be to know that there's a need. And I'm sure if people are making all that effort to find land, I'm sure there is a need. But yeah, that's always important to make sure that there is a need and you're not doing something that maybe doesn't positively contribute to the community. There could be other ways of community gardening, whereas you attach yourself to a existing organization. A lot of libraries tend to have maybe space for raised beds, even religious buildings like churches and mosques. They might have space to put raised beds in. It's just approaching them being like, I want to grow food. Maybe the people who are part of this community want to grow it with me. Can we put some beds in? So working with local organizations too is a good way to start your own little community gardening.
You've mentioned RHS quite a few times. What is RHS?
So that would be the Royal Horticultural Society. So they are a huge, I don't know how many years they've been around, but a very, very long time. And they kind of are the governing body of horticulture in a way, I guess. They have a lot of resources online. Their website is great for food growing resources. They give lots of advice on when to grow things and how to grow things and everything you can think of. So yeah, they're a really good website to check out if people are interested in food growing.
Thank you. And I guess, is there a difference between growing edible plants and plants in a raised bed to actually putting them into the ground?
Yeah, there is a difference. It depends if that raised bed is on concrete or attached to soil. But there is a difference. If you're planting straight into soil, you have the microorganisms of that soil, which are immediately available to that plant. Watering is sometimes a bit easier because that plant has access to the vast amount of water that might be in the soil underneath it. Growing in raised beds or in containers can be a little bit different because you are potentially adding in fresh soil, which maybe isn't as fertile as the soil you'll find on the ground. There isn't worms and things like that in there just yet. Eventually that does happen, so it's fine. And also, you'll probably also need to water more when you have a raised bed because it doesn't have access to all that water underground. The roots can't find it. Those are the only differences. Other than that, you can grow most of the time. You can grow what you grow in the ground in raised beds too. It's just how you look after them that is different. Yeah.
And being in the UK with like colder climates generally, is there also an element around growing stuff that are more tropical based here as well? Like, can you still grow tropical based stuff here? And what does that look like? And so I guess, is that a factor in it all?
Yeah, it is. A lot of community groups I work with, the adults want to, like I work with a lady from Kerala, and she, bless her, at home, she grows she sows seed from everything she cooks, I think, basically, and she'll just sow the seed because that's how she connects with plants, from the stuff that she knows. And a lot of it's tropical and doesn't grow very easily in England. But I have seen recently that there are new varieties that are coming in which grow in England climate without the need for a greenhouse. So a lot of the time, if you want to grow tropical plants, by tropical, I'm thinking of things like aubergines and okra and stuff like that, and ludi. So things like that need a bit more heat. So you'd want to put them in a greenhouse. But there are new varieties, so things like aubergine and new okra varieties, which you can grow outside of a greenhouse. So there is potential there for people to connect with, their traditional foods.
Because I think that's really important, especially like for a lot of cultural people that are coming from countries where, food is something that is a big part of the culture as well.
Yeah.
And, coming over here, there's been that disconnect, and kind of some of the reasons why, I guess, certain traditions, even you saying your parents being farmers, certain things don't necessarily naturally transition as it would probably like back home in these places.
Yeah.
And I think, it's really important that, I guess, now that we're discovering it can be done, it's more celebrated and shared that, like there is hope, I guess. There is hope.
Yeah, there is. But it's also great it's so great gardening with people from other backgrounds and ethnicities, just learning their different uses of plants, or maybe plants that they've like adopted so that they could they mimic what they used to grow, what their traditional food growing is, like some spinaches and stuff. But yeah, it's so important that people can still grow what they are used to, what they actually eat at home, Like I don't think I've ever grown swede, or I don't really grow parsnips very much because I don't use them in my traditional Indian food. So yeah, and I've always things like tomatoes, potatoes, onions, all those kinds of foods. We use them all the time, so I grow them more naturally too.
Yeah, that makes sense. Living in the city as well, and being in this kind of climate and air pollution, does that kind of affect, I guess, not just the plants, but like the wildlife as well, like interact with the garden and spaces as well?
Yeah, I'm sure. I think it does. I don't know the science behind it, but I know there's been studies that have gone into that. It's not even the air pollution, it's also the sound of cars and things like that, sound of vehicles. And yeah, just generally if the air is poor, then it affects us as humans, and it would affect the wildlife too. It's just not a very natural environment. It's not how it was like designed for them, So it does affect them. Having more trees is a great way to kind of mitigate that effect. So planting more trees that clean the air, planting more plants helps.
In terms of like loads of people, I guess, with young people, children and stuff, and even adults too, they think about summer being the only time to do like activities or engage with the outdoors, gardens and stuff.
Yeah.
What would you say about, trying to do stuff in the other seasons, and what does that look like?
So, yeah, most people, especially with children, summer is the time where everything's growing, there's things to harvest, things to eat. Winter also has plenty to harvest and plenty to eat. It just happens very slowly, so it's different. what I like to do instead is I like to incorporate arts into the winter time. So in terms of activities, I do a lot of things like using clay, for example, to make, you can like squish plants into a bit of clay, like a coaster-shaped bit of clay. They can go around, forage for whatever they can find. There's still things growing. That's what will surprise them, that you can still find plants growing, a lot of evergreen things and leaves down on the floor. Squish them into the clay, let it dry, paint it, make something of it, you know. So I think arts and crafts are a really good thing to bring in over winter, and it's something I really enjoy incorporating as well. Yeah.
So you do a lot of like nature art. I know you mentioned that right at the beginning as well.
Yeah.
So what's some of the fabrics or like kind of ways that you do it? I think you might have brought some stuff to show as well.
Yeah. So one of the things that I am currently very, very, I'm exploring and I'm thoroughly enjoying is natural dyeing. Because a lot of plants traditionally were used for natural dyeing, and then we moved it to synthetic dyes, and then the natural dyes kind of took a step back. So I want to make that connection again, because again, it's a great way for people to interact with plants. So this here is a scarf which I dyed. It's not been fully finished yet, but this was dyed with indigo. So indigo is a plant that the leaves are used to create dyes with, and it creates a beautiful blue. And it was traditionally, and at the beginning, it was used to dye denim. So jeans were dyed with indigo in India. That was where they were dyed. I also like to explore different techniques, and one of the techniques is this Japanese method called Hapazome, and it's basically you literally bash flowers and leaves onto fabric, and it transfers the color of them onto the fabric. You literally just smash in it. It's great fun. Kids love it too. And you could do it on bags. You can do it on little napkins. You can do it on bunting. And yeah, I think it's just it adds another element of nature interaction for all ages. And yeah, this is something I'm exploring. I also like doing things like natural fibers, finding natural fibers to weave with, clay modeling. Yeah, it's a whole world, which is very exciting.
So how do you get to like make these prints last as well? I guess that's another.
Yes, that's very important. So what you do is you treat the fabric beforehand. So, if, for example, I bought some socks the other day, which I wanted to dye with. I dyed them with nettles. What you do first is, one, you've got to use the right kind of fabric. So, cotton, you can dye all sorts, but I tend to go for cotton. You need to scour it, so that basically means cleaning it thoroughly, like removing any sort of chemicals that have been put in there during the production process. And then you mordant it. So mordanting is a dyeing process where you treat the fabric with a chemical that will hold the dye. So that makes the fabric, the dye basically stick onto the fabric. And that means even if you put it in your washing machine or you washed it, it'll last for a very long time. It might still fade, but it'll last for a very long time. So you can mordant with alum, or I've also mordanted with soy milk. So I've like soaked my fabric in soy milk for like a day or two prior to dyeing it. And that helps the dyes stay onto the fabric for a lot longer.
Cool. That's really interesting and useful to know, because I've actually done the second one you mentioned.
Oh, the Hapazome, yeah.
I always forget the traditional name for it. But I didn't know about the maintaining the print side of it. So that's something that's obviously important as well if you want to kind of hold on to it or you want to like appreciate what's been created.
Exactly. Like, sometimes you can just, sometimes it's fine. Sometimes you can treat it as a piece of art that will fade over time, and that's natural. But yeah, if you have the opportunity, then treating it is great.
Can you remember the first time you grew something and ate it?
I think it has to be the tomatoes that I grew with my dad. Don't remember what age that was. Very I think it might have been like 12 or 13. My dad grew some tomato plants in the back garden in containers, and I ate them. That was very fun. I was like, wow, this is what tomatoes are supposed to taste like.
I was literally about to say, did you notice that there was any like taste difference with the ones you grew compared to the ones you buy?
Yeah, all the time. Every time I'm like eating something that I've grown, I'm just like, oh, this is what it tastes like. Raspberries in particular. I find raspberries you find in the supermarket do not taste like actual raspberries. When you grow them, taste so different. Yeah.
So, can you actually just grow foods from scraps, I guess? Like, I know you mentioned that a few people do that and you've heard of it. But is that a real thing, or is it just like a TikTok scam kind of thing?
No, you can. You can. It works. Like things like celery, lettuce, spring onions are amazing. Cutting the bottom bit, putting it in some water. They do grow. They don't grow, maybe you'll probably get like 1 or 2 harvests from them before it gets tired, because it doesn't have a lot of energy left in it. But it does work. And yeah, it's a great activity to do with kids, especially the spring onions, because they grow so quickly too.
Is there like a rule as well, I guess, around like seeds and like using, I think I've heard this phrase of like save for seeds. Is there a rule around like using seeds or planting seeds and like to get the best out of growing?
Like the type of seed, or
Yeah, so like, either like buying the seeds or using
saved seeds.
Saved seeds, yeah, or what is like the best kind of technique you'd say based on like some of your experiences?
Yeah. So buying seeds, I tend to go for seeds which are organic seeds, are not genetically modified, are not F1 varieties. F1 varieties means that the plant that they produce, if you want to save the seed from it, it won't. If you save the seed and grow another plant from that plant won't turn out to be how the original one was. Basically, I avoid F1s. I go for organic, and there's some great companies out there, like Real Seeds, at the top of my head is the one I can think of, and there's some others too. I think Vital Seeds is another one. I buy seeds quite regularly, and every season I'm buying seeds. But equally, I am also saving seeds. So I try to save a lot of flower seeds in particular, things like poppies, things like calendula, to name a few. Tomatoes, you can save tomato seeds. If you've grown like a non-F1 variety, I'd save the tomato seeds. And it's a really good way, because you can also share those seeds with other people. You save money. You're like creating a circular system where you are you're just reusing your seeds, and that's how it was always done. People would save seeds from their crop for the following year. I'd recommend buying from good companies that grow seeds in the right ways without any chemicals, and save seeds wherever you can. It saves you money.
And the save seeds kind of element of it, is it like you pick your best cropped, or is it just anyone?
Anyone. I guess if you didn't like a certain variety of something, then you wouldn't save the seed of it. But if you had like 5 of these, trying to remember, think of a tomato variety. If you had 5 Golden Delight tomatoes growing, and one maybe didn't produce as much tomatoes as the other, it doesn't really matter. The seed is the same, they're all producing the same seed. So you can save the seed from that one too.
And in terms of propagating, is there any tips around that? And what is propagating? I've heard that thrown around so many times.
Propagating is basically growing a plant from a part of the original plant. So on this table over here, we have this lovely house plant whose name I can't remember right now, but it's sitting in a jar with some water. And these are cuttings that were taken from the mother plant, put in water, and this is it being propagated to produce more. with propagation, different plants need to be propagated at different times of year. House plants tend to be any time of year you can propagate them, but food that you're growing, like cuttings of things like salvia shrubs or lavender, all of that needs to happen in autumn. So you take those cuttings in autumn, you put them in a bit of like nice draining soil, and then you just let them take root over the winter, and then in spring they're ready to go plant. So there are certain times of year that things need propagating. Some things are harder to propagate than others. Some plants are really easy. Some plants you can just dig up and split the root ball, and then you have another plant and you've propagated it. So yeah, it can be used in, that word you've probably heard it thrown around because it can be used in so many different ways. I don't have any solid tips for that, but I'd recommend people try it because again, it's a really good way to get more plants out of one. Like verbena, which is a really beautiful flower with purple flowers. If you took a cutting from that in autumn, put it in a pot, maybe dipped it in some rooting hormone, put it in a pot, by the following season, you have a brand new plant. And you can take like 10 cuttings from one plant and you have 10 new plants the following year. So it's a great way to grow your garden at very little cost.
Sounds great. And also Sharon, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Is there a main difference, or can you still grow things like herbs and tomatoes indoors, like on a windowsill, rather than like outside in a garden space or polytunnel?
Yeah, absolutely. You can grow, as long as you have a windowsill that gets a good amount of sun. So if you want to, ideally like a south-facing windowsill, or just a windowsill that gets at least like 6 hours of sun during the day in the summer, I think that is a perfect spot to grow plants. You could grow tomatoes, you could grow everything in pots on a windowsill. Just make sure that it's more regularly watered, because it's on a windowsill and it's inside your house, it's more likely to dry out a lot faster. So just keep it watered. Make sure, again, when it's if it's in direct sun, like especially with a glass in front of it, it can like scorch the plants, it can burn the leaves. And if it does that, you want to place it a little bit further away from the window. So like on a table a little bit further away. But yeah, you can grow all sorts of herbs, tomatoes, flowers on a windowsill. There's a lot of potential that one windowsill can give you.
So last but not least, where can people find you and connect with you?
You can find me mainly on Instagram. I'm hanging out there a lot. My name is Hafsah Hafaji. And if people want to learn more or have a question about anything I've said, they can drop me a message. I'd be happy to answer it. I share like the things I get up to on there, whether it's activities I do with children, the kind of craft things I'm doing, or just something I'm learning. So that's where you can find me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's really nice to join you in this conversation.
Thank you so much. Thank you.